Good evening. How are y'all tonight? Wonderful. That's good. That's good. All right. Huh? Yeah. Not sure if we're all here. Is that what you said? All right. We are continuing our study tonight on stewardship. Kind of shifting gears just a little bit, because generally when you think of stewardship, you think of material things, money, that kind of thing. But tonight our study, I'm very consistent. I always forget this. Our study tonight is going to be on the stewardship of time, managing our time. Now I want to do the class tonight like we did last time, where I've got a series of questions. I've got some passages we'll look at as well, and we'll get to as much of that as we can. But just like money, just like material possessions, the time that God has given us is really His. And so there is the need to manage that in the same way we would manage material possessions that belong to someone else. In the same way we look at our money, we should look at our time as well. And so when we think about managing our time, we've got that same emphasis. And so let's just go ahead and get in to some of the questions. First question that I want us to think about: what are some ways that we misuse or waste our time? I'm not asking for confession, okay? I'm just asking in general, what are things that people do that all of a sudden it's like, oh, I have wasted a whole day, or I've wasted, all right, let me do what Sharon is doing. She's doing this. You know, this lesson 10 years ago, maybe even less than that, would not have started that way, would it? Because we didn't have those things. 20. Yeah, I just hated to say that because that sounds like such a long time. But you're right, yeah. But, years ago, let me just do it that way. Years ago, we wouldn't talk about that. I've got some statistics here Dale put together. I don't know where he found these or if he just made them up. Studies show, and I would assume this is the average person, and I don't know if this is per day or if this is a week, probably a day. On the internet, 6 hours. TV, 4 hours. Years ago, that was the number one thing, wasn't it? That people spend more time on TV than on anything else, but that's not the case anymore. Of course, the way we watch shows, you may have watched on television for years. Now it's on an iPad or a computer or on your phone. And so internet, 6 hours, TV, 4 hours, social media, 2 hours, phone, 5 hours. And then this statement that the average person checks his phone, like picks it up, looks at it, does something on it. You tell me, how many times a day? 50, 20, 4 or 5 at least. What he's got here says 63. I did a little bit of math. If you're awake 16 hours a day, that's about once every 15 minutes. I think that's probably greater than that with a lot of people. I mean, if you're going to spend a total of 6 hours or 5 hours on your phone throughout the day, you probably check it quite often. Have you ever seen somebody that they can't leave their phone there or in their pocket or whatever? It's just almost like habit. Pick it out and look at it, and do something on it. Yeah, I've seen kids just every few minutes take a picture of themselves. I don't understand that. Part of that's that I'm older, but Yeah, those are the kind of things that we see today. So that's obviously one of the major problems. Harold?
I've seen people, I've been to the doctor's office, just like, they come in, they're ready to, when they sit down, pop that phone out right
Mm-hmm.
there.
Mm-hmm. Now, depending on how it's used, right? Because are there some legitimate and good uses that we can put the phone to? I mean, put a Bible app on it and you can read your Bible. Um, Obviously, you're using your phone, but reading the Bible is a good thing. And so, uh, but generally speaking, that's not always what's going on. And so that's one of the major things. What's something else that we do or maybe don't do that misuses or wastes time? Watch football games. How long is the average football game? Too long? Did somebody say? Anthony's not here to say too long. 4 hours, yeah. I don't know what you're back there doing this for. Oh, you had 3 up, yeah. At least 3. I mean, and what do you get at the end of it? You know, yeah, a score that you don't remember. Sometimes you don't want to remember. But I mean, there's nothing wrong with enjoyment, and that's another question we'll get to, but too much of that is obviously wasting or misusing time. So Hal said football games, but we could expand that, could we not, to entertainment. Nothing wrong with entertainment, but too much of it is certainly a misuse of our time. Somebody else. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely come unwinding because there's nothing out there in their face, you know, to entertain them.
Yeah, yeah.
They're addicted to it or whatever.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move this because we're kind of getting into this one because these two go together. What are reasons that people do it? And I think that's you're getting at that idea as well. I don't want to sound like the old person that's, you remember when we were young, you know, remember the days before the phone and the constant entertainment. What did you do? Always had a phone, but not this kind of phone. No. Played outside. I mean, you used your imagination, you used your mind. A lot of that doesn't happen today. It's not necessarily good or bad, but it's different. And part of that is we become, and I mentioned the person that just cannot leave the phone laying there. They've got to pick it up and look at it. We become addicted to those kind of things. And it was true of television. It can be true of the internet. It can be true of the phone. Those are just different mediums of the same problem if we're not careful.
Because you're avoiding doing something, you just do it and just read. It's an escape.
Right. Okay.
A lot of people need to escape.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you're right, and it doesn't necessarily have to be electronic. It can just be a book. If I spend all my time reading a book, I'm not accomplishing what I need to accomplish in my life, then that's a problem as well. So one of the reasons is trying to escape. Maybe things are not like they need to be, and you're trying to escape. Sometimes it's responsibility that we're trying to get away from. And instead of doing what I need to do, then I'm doing something else, misusing or wasting time. Somebody else. Mm-hmm. 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 All right. And you're exactly right. You made me think about my great uncle had a golf club. The head of it was broken off. And he sit close enough to the TV that he could use it as a remote. Of course, that's also what kids are for, right? Before the remote control. They were the ones that changed the channel. But laziness, I mean, what you're talking about really is laziness. That can be a reason we waste time, could it not? If I'm not responsible enough to do what I need to do, I'll find some way to waste time or to misuse it. Okay, all right. So, but now is that a waste or a misuse of time? Nick.
As a young person, I'll say we see the Saints. I referee basketball. All the time I tell people you can tell a difference in the kids that are not going to play. As soon as they get done playing a game, they're waiting on a sibling to play. First they sit down, play, they're taking a iPad.
Mm-hmm.
And you think, that's bad. When you look over, their parents are missing their kids playing the game because they're on the phone.
Right.
And they're not paying attention either. I think we're just unsettled people. And we can't just sit still and just 15 minutes in life.
Yeah, that's a really good point because kids are reflecting what they're seeing. Or, and I've seen this, and you probably have too, you go to a restaurant, a family comes in, they got a young kid, the first thing they do is hand that kid a phone. Why? Occupy his time, keep them quiet. They're not a problem yet, right? Yet. Because it will be if they can't learn, like you said, how simply to look forward to just sitting. And I know this is a foreign concept to many people in our world today, but sitting and thinking. Sitting and enjoying where we are. Sitting and talking to somebody. Regina and I went out to eat, it's been about a month or so ago, and where I was sitting, they were to my left. And she had noticed it, and she pointed it out. It was an older couple. I say older, they're probably around my age, so I don't know if they were older or not. Both of them had a Kindle. You know what a Kindle is. And they had the stand where it sits on the table. He was sitting here with his plate with the Kindle there. She was sitting on the other side with her plate and her Kindle, so that they were sitting. And she said, I haven't seen them say a word to each other. And about that time, he said something to her, and she responded. But they were both sitting there eating out, reading a book. I enjoy reading, but that just kind of seems out of place, does it not? And so that's really a little bit of field from where we are, but it kind of fits too, because we get so tied to certain things that they take all of our attention, all of our time, and then we're not doing what we need to be doing. Good thoughts. Anything else? Gene. Okay. Yeah. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Okay. So it's not always electronic things. There can be other things that we allow. So the next question will then fit with that, how can we make better use of our time? We see some of the problems. We see some of the things that we've got to work on. What can we do to make sure we make better use of our time and use our time in the way that God would have us to use it? Larry. All right. Yes. Okay. All right. Or there's nothing wrong with writing it down either, right? But making priorities, prioritizing. If making a plan, and that kind of goes hand in hand with it. If I can only do one thing today, what will it be? If I can only do two things today, what will that second one be? And make a prioritized list, as you said, in your mind, or write it down. When we talk about, now, kind of equate this with money. When you make money, you get paid, you have a budget, right? You write it down or not, but you've got, that money's going to go out a certain way. And you know, the old saying, if you don't budget your money, you're just going to wonder where it went. The same's true with our time, isn't it? I mean, what would be wrong with sitting down and saying, okay, Monday, tomorrow morning, Monday, these are the things I need to accomplish. These are the things I want to do, and I write those down, and this is how I plan to do that. And that's a good use of time. I know somebody, I'm not going to call his name, but when he graduated from college with his degree, he's a preacher, he sat down and he wrote out a schedule for his study in 15-minute increments. And he said, I'm going to study this for 15 minutes. I'm going to do this for 15 minutes, maybe a 45-minute block on this, but every 15 minutes was accounted for in his studies. They do. That's true. That's true. Now, to finish my thought about that, was that a little bit over the top? It may have been. But guess what? He does a really good job teaching, preaching. He knows this book. Why does he know this book? Because he spent time with it. And so, you know, it's like the old saying, it was Brother Nichols, Gus Nichols, that was preaching in a meeting, and after the meeting was over, he was shaking people's hands as they went out, and this lady came out and said, Brother Nichols, I would give half my life to know the Bible as well as you do. You remember what his response was? That's what it cost me. You've got to put the time in, whether it's learning the Bible or reaching lost souls or, you know, whatever it is that you want to be good at. You've got to prioritize, you've got to plan to get there. And, you know, if you're going to pay off a bill that you've got, or you're going to save money for a certain expenditure you're going to make, you've got to plan to do it. It doesn't just happen. And the same is true with our time. Proverbs 21 and verse 5. Men will, I can't remember how it starts. Let me just turn to it because it goes along with what you were saying, Larry. Proverbs 21 and verse 5. And the wise man said, the plans of the diligent lead surely to plenty, but those of everyone who is hasty surely to poverty. And so if we plan, if we prioritize, then it's going to bring about good. Here he uses the idea of plenty. But if we fail, and we're not going to prioritize, we're not going to plan, we're just going to take things as they come, it will lead to poverty. Now let me go back to something you said, though, about things do happen. So, you've decided, you're not a preacher, you're not learning it that way, but you do want to know what the Bible teaches. So you decide, I'm going to set aside 30 minutes this morning, or 30 minutes this afternoon, or 30 minutes tonight before I go to bed, and I'm going to study my Bible. And you know what's going to happen. You get a phone call, or something happens that you have to go take care of that you weren't planning on it, and that plan's out the window. So what do you do? Oh, well, I guess I'll study. If at first you don't succeed, you try again. But you do have to take into account when you prioritize, when you make plans, that they must be flexible. I remember, I think it was the first year I ever went to polishing the pulpit. Eric Lyons taught a class on planning. He did that for youth ministers, how to plan the work with young people. And one thing that stood out from what he had to say was, when you make plans, use a pencil. Because you got to change them at times. And no plan is going to be perfect. Go back to the idea of budgeting, for your household expenses, that kind of thing. No budget's going to be perfect, because they're made up by people. And we forget things, or things change, and things, happen that we weren't expecting, or whatever. The same is true with our time. But if we don't prioritize and don't plan, then there's not going to be the success that we certainly want. Good thought. Anything else about how to make better use of our time? Prioritizing is pretty good. All right.
When I was a young mother, I have older now, it's a little overwhelming, try to figure out what you're gonna do today, because a lot of times the day will be gone and you haven't accomplished anything. So what I've made, and I'm not saying not to get it, I need a lot of help, but anyway, one thing that I made a promise to myself to try to do is everything that I have to do, like cooking and washing dishes and making the bed, and accomplish one other thing. Whether it was cleaning out a closet or mopping a certain floor or whatever, just accomplish one other thing besides what you have to do. And that helps me to know where I am, and because it can be overwhelming when you're, I know that don't sound very, very overwhelming to keep house and all that, but when you got several little kids and trying to keep house and all that, it is overwhelming to begin with, and anyway, that helps me to know that I've got to do one more thing besides what I have to do.
All right. And that sounds amazing. That's awesome. I think that's a great plan, because what that is saying, I can't do everything, but I don't want to be in a position where I feel like I didn't do anything. Now, if you're taking care of the house and taking care of kids, you did accomplish something, obviously. But, then you also look back and say, well, I wanted to do this, I wanted to do that, I wanted to do this. I didn't get any of that done. And that can be discouraging. But saying, I'm going to do one thing, and that is a start. And it's a part of that planning. That's a very good, that's a very practical idea on how to make sure that we use our time. Anybody else? Elaine.
I'm sure I got from Dad that somebody from here gave him a paper doing the entire Bible in a year.
Mhm.
I've done it before, but I just haven't out and finished. And so that was a start for me. And I think since the beginning of the year, I missed like 2 days, and then the next day I just get caught up. I have that paper right next to me, and I mark it off after I read it and study it. And I think that's on too. So sometimes we talk about it. So that's like a start.
All right, and that even if you, at the end of the year, haven't finished, you get a whole lot further than if you don't start at all. All right. And so those are two really good ideas. And I know Bible reading plans can sometimes be criticized. You're just checking a box, but you're not if you're doing it in the right way. And it can be helpful because it's a plan. I mean, this is a big book. There's a whole lot here. And it can be overwhelming. And if you start and you get bogged down, I don't really have a plan on how to finish it. And so it's easy to kind of lay it aside. But this helps you to keep going. Gene? Mm-hmm.
You could read it and understand it, but you don't go into any great detail or find the details, what's behind. And that's where I mess up. I know I mess up. I read something, I read what I'm supposed to, and I'm cheating, right? But my point is, if you're just reading it, if you can remember some of it, then you want to, go into more depth with it. Now you might copy something. But for the most part, I do my reading, and then I may turn the TV on.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, do I get a lot of that. So, but, of course, I've been a member of the church for quite some time, and I don't know everything there is about the church. I know enough, I think, that at least I have a chance to get better. Now, whether or not I'll make it, I don't know. There's a lot of things that I don't do that I think I should, and I'm trying to do that those things daily. But I don't, that's what
Mm-hmm.
but some of it is reading the Bible. If I wasn't reading the Bible, I may be watching some stupid thing on television.
Yeah. And you make a point about the difference between reading and studying. And one good thing, this is not a class on Bible study, but if we're talking about making better use of our time, this certainly would be a part of that. When you read something that you don't understand or something that kind of piques your interest, it's really good to write that down. Keep a notebook and say, okay, here's something that I read I wasn't really sure about. I want to go back and study that. Or here's something that I think I need to spend more time on, and so I'm going to go and spend some time studying that. And that is a helpful way of making Bible reading more productive rather than just, like checking a box like I said earlier, because I'm more likely to remember that or get something out of it. There's good thoughts. Anything else along that line? All right, next question. And I'll give you a little backstory on this. Discuss the difference between quality and quantity as it relates to the use of our time. I had a teacher at Freed Hardeman that spent a great deal of time working at the school, writing, doing other things, and he made the statement once in class about he didn't have a whole lot of time at home, but the quantity was not as important as the quality of time that he spent with his family. And I may have been 19 years old. I didn't buy it. I thought, that almost sounds like somebody who's trying to justify what he's doing. I don't know where I got this, but I've read it or heard it. But children, this is talking about parents and children, children spell the word love. You know how they spell the word love? Time. Children need time with their parents. And I don't know that I can make up for the lack of time by calling the time I spend with them quality time. Now, obviously, there has to be a quality to it, and not just being in the same room, both of us on our phone, ignoring each other. But at the same time, you can't do, and I'm use the illustration of children, same true with Bible reading or Bible study or any other thing that we do that's worth doing. So give some thought, make some profound statements here. Tell me some things that come to your mind when you think about the difference between quality and quantity as it relates to the way we use our time. All right, Larry? Mm-hmm. And that's, you know, in the grand scheme of things, Bigfoot's not all that big a deal, but the relationship of father and son is. Oh, yeah. I'm sure he does. Yeah. Yeah. And you think back as a child, you think about things you remember that parents may have forgotten, but it made an impression and you remember it. You can't, let me say it this way, you can't have quality time without a certain quantity. There's got to be that investment of time there. Calvin, were you just stretching? Or did you have something to say? Mm-hmm. Yes, that's a very good point. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no doubt. And that's a good illustration. I knew his name at one time, but I can't recall. But it seems like his last name was Everett. But anyway, he spoke for almost 2 hours. And no. He's not talking about the Lincoln Douglas. He's talking about the speaker at Gettysburg before Lincoln. No, that was not Douglas. But he was well known. I mean, he would be the kind of person that, oh, he's in town, I'm going to go hear him speak. But we don't remember. The fact that I can't remember his name is telling. But Lincoln, and he was disappointed in himself initially. But those words live on in our history. Very concise, but the quality behind them is certainly true. And so there is an importance in the quality that we spend. 15 minutes of good, focused Bible study is far better than, and I'll pull something back from earlier in our discussion, sitting in front of a TV with a football game on and my Bible open in my lap for 4 hours. How much good am I going to get out of that? So I was reading my Bible for 4 hours. And you should have seen that touchdown pass. I mean, you know, that's really, there's no quality there. So So that is important. Harold.
Well, you know, they say that a good speaker can hold an audience for about 20 minutes, is all.
And that may be a little long for our day and time. Things change. In fact, we were talking in the elders deacons meeting earlier about, especially on social media, the length of the video clips gets shorter and shorter and shorter. And you know, you put a 10-minute clip on, and people are going to say, "That's too long. I'm not watching that." But then you have two-minute clips, and they'll sit there for 2 hours watching those, one after the other. Ruby? Uh-huh.
Or something, and there, and you don't have to really stop what you're doing. You see it, and you hear it, and
Mm-hmm.
and then you can go about your business. And lots of times people don't want to take that much time to do it.
Right, exactly. And we can either, you know, say, well, people should be willing to spend more time with Bible study and keep putting out the 20-minute, 30-minute, and nobody watch them, or recognize the audience and do something like this that gets the thought in their mind and allows them to.
I automatically think, oh, this is going to be long. You know, that's just kind of what's in the back of my mind. And then it's not. It's that, oh, okay, that just like the point, that's it.
Right.
I think that gets a lot more attention.
Mm-hmm. I know many of you know David Sane. David lives up in, is it Lawrenceburg? Fayetteville. I think it's Fayetteville, or he may have moved to McMinnville, but when he was at Wood Avenue in Florence for years, he did radio spots, 60 golden seconds. It was a 1-minute radio spot, part of which was taken up by, I'm David Sane with Wood Avenue Church of Christ, and you know, and so maybe 40 to 45 seconds. But he did such a good job putting that together that it was worth listening to. And that's one thing about a 45-minute sermon is a whole lot easier to prepare than a 4 to 5 minute or a 1.5 minute, because every single word matters when you've just got a minute, and you've got to put the quality to it. So I don't know how we got there, but that kind of fits this idea of quality and quantity. All right, anything else along that line? All right. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Yeah, and that's that idea of being there. And, you know, obviously in that day and time, she wasn't on her phone. There wasn't a TV on in front of her. She was able to spend time with her kids. All right, let me move on because I've got about 5 minutes. How important is rest to the proper management of time. While you're thinking, I didn't write down the passage, but it's in Matthew chapter 10. Jesus sent the apostles out on the limited commission. And they came back all excited about what they had done. And it may not be Matthew's account. It may be Luke's account. I may give you that as homework assignment. Find the passage. But what happens, they came back and they told Jesus everything about what they had done. And his next words to them were, come away and rest. And Luke chapter 9, verse number 10. There's the 10. Luke chapter 9, verse 10. The apostles, when they had returned, told him all that they had done. Then he took them and went aside privately into a desert place belonging to the city called Bethsaida. And so here they have been working. Here they have been engaged in this work. And they're excited. And Jesus said, now you need to rest. Multiple times in the scriptures, Jesus went away from his apostles, went away from his disciples, and spent time in prayer. And so the question, how important is it, and how do we balance the idea of working, doing whatever it is as Christians we ought, but then also spending time rest, recuperating, kind of reinvigorating ourselves. How important is that to the management of time?
I think it's very important because when we stretch ourselves out to the end, we don't accomplish anything.
Oh.
We're really not good at anything.
Okay. Think about the nation of Israel. Did God give them time for rest? What day of the week was that called? The seventh, or the Sabbath. They did not work on that day. And so there's a couple of examples of how, and Carlton, you mentioned it earlier, how, with television, whatever, they want to keep you drawn in. And our society does that. If you're not doing something, if you're not going somewhere, if you're not involved in something, what are you doing? And you can go and be involved and so forth until you stretch yourself so thin, you can't focus your mind on what you need to. There are times that we need to have that step back, rest, allow the mind to refocus, to remind us what really matters. All right? I think that's all the questions that I had. I do have a couple of passages. I've got a number of them here, but Psalm 90, verse 12. Teach us to number our days. Why? That we may apply our heart to wisdom. As the NIV says, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. As you get older, and many in this group, you've done this already, you see the importance of time. You see the importance of days, because days draw closer or fewer and fewer. And we realize where we're moving toward and how important it is. When you're young, you think, I've got so much time ahead of me. But we realize that's not the case. Colossians 4 and verse 5 says, walk in wisdom toward those that are without, redeeming the time. And if you're familiar with that phrase, redeeming the time, literally it is buying up opportunity. It's the idea of taking advantage of the opportunity as it comes. You can't save it. And one thing different with time and money is you can save money, put it in the bank. You can't save time, can you? Once that second is gone, it's gone. It's not coming back. And you can't save up time to use later. But you can take advantage of opportunities as they come. And that's what that passage is saying. Similar in Ephesians 5 and verse 15. And the reason for it, because the days are evil. There is need to take advantage of those opportunities. Wednesday night we'll start in Ecclesiastes 3 verse 1. And it speaks to time as well. For everything there's a season. Time for every matter under heaven. And what we were just talking about with rest. There's a time for that. There's a time for work. There's a time for recreation. There's a time for family. There's a time for you fill in the blank, whatever it is. That's a great place for us to end tonight. And that's where we'll start in our Wednesday night class here in the auditorium. I appreciate your involvement in the class tonight. You had a whole lot of really good things, worthwhile things to say.